Kale Riven woke to the soft hum of life support systems, the sterile scent of antiseptic clinging to his lungs, as if the ship itself was breathing for him. Pain radiated from his ribs and left arm, a dull, persistent reminder of the mission that had nearly killed him, yet the greater weight pressing across his legs forced his attention downward. He froze before he even fully looked, instinct tightening every muscle despite the injuries that begged him to remain still. The briefing files resurfaced in fragments, blurred images, shredded teams, a designation whispered rather than spoken. Apex Predator. When his gaze finally settled, reality proved worse than memory. The creature sprawled across him was massive, its sleek black body threaded with faintly glowing blue stripes that pulsed like distant starlight. Its head rested against his thigh, jaws large enough to end him in a single motion, yet its breathing remained slow and even. Kale did not dare move. Training urged immediate action, escape, survival at any cost, but experience whispered something else. Sudden motion would mean death. Instead, he listened, measuring the rhythm of the creature's breaths against the distant beeping of medical monitors. A flicker of memory cut through the haze. Red skies, shattered rock, and the moment he had lowered his weapon instead of firing. He had seen the creature then, wounded, cornered, yet still terrifying, and for reasons he still could not fully explain, he had hesitated. Now it was here. His eyes traced the injuries along its side, darkened fur matted where energy blasts had scorched flesh. The realization settled heavily in his chest. It was not merely resting, it was recovering, and somehow it had chosen him as the place to do it. Kale swallowed carefully, aware that even the smallest shift might trigger a lethal response. Fear coiled tightly beneath his ribs, yet it was no longer alone. Curiosity pressed against it, insistent and unwelcome. Why had it not killed him? Why follow him back to the ship? The creature stirred, its ear twitching as if responding to thoughts he had not spoken. Kale's breath hitched, every instinct screaming at him to prepare for the end. Slowly, impossibly, one luminous eye opened. For a single suspended moment, predator and human regarded one another. There was no confusion in that gaze, no blind instinct, only a sharp, assessing awareness that made his pulse thunder. It saw him, understood him, and in that instant, decided something he could not yet comprehend. The eye closed again. The creature exhaled softly, its body settling more fully against him as though he were nothing more than solid ground. Kale remained motionless, heart racing, mind struggling to reconcile terror with the fragile, impossible truth taking shape. The deadliest thing he had ever encountered had chosen not to kill him. Outside the viewport, distant stars drifted in silent indifference. But inside the quiet med bay, everything had changed. Kale understood, with a certainty that sent a chill through him, that whatever happened next would not follow any rule he had ever been taught. And if the creature woke fully, that fragile decision might not hold. He forced himself to breathe slowly, matching its rhythm, as though synchronization alone might keep the peace intact. Every passing second stretched, heavy with consequence, until the silence itself felt like a test he could not afford to fail. And somewhere deep inside, he realized he was no longer waiting to survive, but to understand the creature resting on his lap. Kale kept his breathing slow, forcing each inhale to match the steady rise and fall of the creature resting across his legs. The fragile rhythm steadied his nerves, yet every second stretched thin with the awareness that a single mistake would end him. He studied it more carefully now, letting observation replace panic. The glow beneath its fur pulsed faintly, not random but patterned, almost like a language written in light. Its claws, partially extended, curved against his leg without pressure, a silent reminder of the violence it was capable of. Yet it did not move to harm him. Kale shifted his focus to its injuries, noticing how shallow breaths occasionally tightened along its ribs. It was not simply resting, it was trusting him during weakness. That realization unsettled him more than fear, ever could. Predators did not trust. They dominated, hunted, destroyed. This one had chosen something else. Carefully, Kale lifted his uninjured hand, moving slowly enough that even the air seemed reluctant to shift. He hesitated inches above its fur, his pulse hammering, then lowered his fingers until they made contact. The warmth surprised him. The texture was softer than expected, dense and alive beneath his touch. The creature's ear flicked, and for a breathless instant he expected teeth and claws. Instead, it exhaled slowly, its body easing further against him as though accepting the contact. Kale felt something shift within himself, a cautious curiosity replacing the rigid terror that had held him. This was not surrender, it was understanding forming in real time. The creature was responding, not reacting, and that difference mattered. A sharp tone broke the silence, slicing through the fragile calm. Kale's gaze snapped toward the door as the intercom crackled to life. Voices, tense and controlled, flooded the room. They demanded confirmation, demanded he remain still, demanded status reports he could barely form. Sensors had detected the intruder. They knew what was inside with him. Kale answered quietly, choosing each word with care. He told them it was calm, that it had not attacked, that it was injured. The silence that followed felt heavier than any response. Then came the inevitable order. They would secure the threat. Armed response teams were already en route. Kale's hand tightened instinctively in the creature's fur. He knew what that meant. They would not see nuance or restraint, only danger. "Wait," he said, his voice firmer now, carrying a conviction he did not fully understand. "It's not hostile." The reply came colder. That assessment was not his to make. Beneath his hand, the creature stirred again, its breathing shifting as if sensing the rising tension. Kale felt the moment slipping, fragile and precarious. He looked down at it, then toward the sealed door, understanding the conflict had finally arrived. If they entered with weapons raised, the calm would shatter. If the calm shattered, no one would survive the consequence. Kale drew a slow breath, steadying himself as much as the creature. He did not move away. He did not let go. Somewhere beyond the door, footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate, carrying the promise of violence. Kale closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, resolve hardening. Whatever happened next, he would not allow them to turn this moment into another mistake. The creature's eye opened once more, brighter now, aware, and watching him for what he would choose to do next. The air thickened with expectation as human and predator waited together on the edge of change. The door slid open with a sharp hiss, and armed figures flooded the med bay with disciplined precision, their weapons raised and locked onto the creature before their boots fully crossed the threshold. The shift in atmosphere was immediate, the quiet tension snapping into something far more volatile as metal, fear, and intent filled the room. Kale did not move away. He forced himself upright despite the pain flaring through his ribs, positioning his body between the soldiers and the creature with a determination that surprised even him. His hand remained pressed against the warm fur, a fragile anchor holding the moment together. The creature reacted at once. Its head lifted, muscles coiling beneath sleek skin as its glowing eyes sharpened to an intense, focused brightness. A low growl vibrated through its chest, deep enough that Kale felt it resonate through his bones. The sound was not mindless aggression. It was a warning. "Stand down," Kale said, his voice steady despite the storm gathering around him. "It hasn't attacked." The lead soldier did not lower his weapon. His stance remained rigid, trained, prepared to fire at the slightest provocation. Orders were repeated, sharper now, demanding Kale step aside. Kale shook his head once, slow and deliberate. "If you raise those weapons, it will respond, and none of us will stop it." The creature shifted, rising partially from its resting position, its body placing subtle weight against Kale as if aligning itself with him rather than against him. Its gaze flicked between the armed figures and the human in front of it, calculating, measuring. A soldier to the right adjusted his grip, the movement small but enough to draw attention. The creature's growl deepened instantly, its body tensing with lethal readiness. The distance between stillness and violence shrank to nothing. "Easy," Cale murmured, not to the soldiers, but to the being beside him. His fingers moved slowly along its neck, maintaining contact, reinforcing the fragile understanding that had formed. "Stay with me." For a heartbeat, nothing changed. Then the creature exhaled, the tension easing just enough to halt the inevitable. It did not retreat, but it did not strike. The soldiers hesitated, uncertainty breaking through their discipline. This was not behavior they had been trained to confront. The creature was not acting like a target. It was responding, choosing waiting. Cale seized that moment. "Look at it," he said quietly, his words cutting through the charged silence. "It's not attacking. It's watching us. It's deciding." The lead soldier's expression tightened, but his weapon lowered a fraction, doubt slipping into the rigid certainty of his posture. Around him, others followed, not fully lowering their aim, but no longer seconds from firing. The creature's eyes remained fixed, its awareness sharp and unblinking, yet its body settled slightly, the immediate threat receding. It stayed close to Cale, its presence no longer looming over him, but beside him. Pain pulsed through Cale's side, yet he held his ground, understanding that movement now carried meaning beyond himself. He was no longer just protecting his life. He was protecting the possibility that this moment represented. A voice crackled through the comms, higher command overriding the immediate chain. New instructions came through, measured and cautious, demanding observation instead of elimination. The tension shifted again, not gone but redirected. Weapons lowered further, though not completely. Cale finally allowed himself a breath that did not feel borrowed. He glanced down at the creature, meeting its gaze fully this time. There was no fear in it now, only a steady awareness that mirrored his own. Slowly, deliberately, the creature lowered itself back onto the bed, its body settling beside him rather than across him, its guard still present but no longer dominant. The room remained silent, every eye fixed on the impossible scene taking shape. Cale did not speak again. He simply rested his hand against the creature, maintaining the fragile connection that had held against fear, against training, against instinct. For now, it was enough. But as the creature's glowing patterns pulsed faintly beneath his fingers, Cale understood that this fragile balance was only the beginning of something none of them yet understood. Time reshaped the tension into something quieter, though no less significant, as the creature remained within the med bay under constant observation. It did not resist containment, yet did not accept it either, its awareness always present, its gaze often returning to Cale as though measuring the distance between them. Cale noticed the pattern before anyone else. The creature ignored every attempt at interaction from the crew, refusing food, disregarding movement, dismissing presence with silent indifference. Yet when he approached, its posture softened, the faint glow along its body settling into a steady rhythm that mirrored calm rather than alertness. He tested the boundary cautiously, stepping closer each time, allowing it to adjust rather than forcing proximity. Each interaction built upon the last, a fragile accumulation of trust that no instrument could quantify. When he finally offered food, it accepted, not with urgency, but with deliberate care, its eyes never leaving his. The realization spread slowly among the crew. This was not obedience. It was choice. Cale found himself studying it as much as it studied him, recognizing patterns in its responses that suggested intelligence far beyond instinct. It reacted not to movement alone, but to intention, its posture shifting before actions fully formed, as if it understood the purpose behind them. That understanding reframed everything. The violence reported in briefings, the destruction left behind, all of it now carried a different implication. It had not been senseless. It had been reactive. Cale carried that thought carefully, aware of how easily it could be dismissed. Yet every moment he spent beside the creature reinforced it. When tension rose among the crew, its body tightened. When calm returned, it eased. It was not merely present. It was aware of them in ways they were only beginning to comprehend. One cycle. As Kale sat beside it near the viewport, the creature shifted closer without prompting, its body settling beside him with quiet certainty. The gesture held no threat, only recognition. He understood, then, what had happened in the moments before he lost consciousness on that distant world. He had lowered his weapon. He had chosen not to strike. And the creature had seen that choice. The thought settled deeply, reshaping the fear that had once defined it into something steadier. This was not the galaxy's deadliest being because it sought destruction. It was deadly because it responded without hesitation when threatened. The crew began to adapt, their movements more measured, their presence less confrontational. The creature did not fully accept them, but it no longer regarded them as immediate threats. The shift was subtle, yet undeniable. Kale felt the weight of that change, understanding his role within it. He had become a bridge between two forces that had never before paused long enough to understand one another. The truth carried responsibility. Trust, once given, could be broken as easily as it had been formed. He rested his hand lightly against the creature's side, feeling the steady pulse of its glow beneath his fingers. It remained still, neither seeking nor rejecting contact, simply allowing it. Beyond the viewport, the stars stretched endlessly, silent witnesses to a moment that would ripple far beyond the confines of the ship. Kale did not look away from them as he spoke quietly, more to himself than anyone else. We were never meant to fear everything we don't understand. The creature's glow pulsed once, brighter, as if in response. It shifted closer again, its presence no longer an intrusion, but something chosen, something shared. Kale allowed himself a small, steady breath, the tension that had once defined every second finally loosening its hold. This was not the end of the conflict. It was the beginning of something far more uncertain. And as the creature settled beside him, no longer as a threat, but as a companion shaped by choice, Kale understood that whatever came next would depend not on strength or weapons, but on whether that fragile understanding could survive beyond this room.